Okay, so let's do a little recap of session 4, which we played last night. So, if you remember when we left off, our heroes were here at the stronghold, having killed the wolves which attacked them, which followed Cormac. So, when we played that session with wolves, we had Cormac deliver the Vector Yaber, and his Blade Adept companion to the Chapel of St. Nylene, right? And then right back, and that's when the wolves struck. So what I did in that session was actually I rolled the wolf encounter while he was on the way to the chapel. But I thought to myself, well, if I do it on the way to the chapel, the other two guys are not involved. So that's why I decided to play the encounter when Cormac was returning to the stronghold. So we started the session last night with me backing up and saying, let's play the scene where you, Cormac, deliver Vector Yaber and the Blade Knight to the Chapel of St. Nylene. So, because, I wanted to do a little bit more of role-playing and not just dump him off to his side. So we role-play the beginning of that encounter, not the beginning, the actual delivery of the guys, right? The guiding of the guys to the chapel. They meet a monk who is taking care of the chapel itself, Brother Baldwin, and is an older man, about 50-something, maybe 60, who actually takes care of the chapel world normally, right? But now Vector Yaber has come to revitalize the area. Yaber makes an attempt. He thanks Cormac for all his help, but now that he has him alone without the other, the Demorthen and the Bard, he tries to dig into what kind of religion Cormac is into, right? To try to determine where his allegiances lie, and tries to persuade him, to try the way of the one God, which is, as we've said before, basically a Christian God analog. They value the virtue of temperance, right? Like reining in your emotions, and so he entreats Cormac with that, and Cormac is a bit evasive. He doesn't want to commit to either side, so several times during the conversation, he pleads, that all this talk of gods is like above his pay grade, right? So he kind of doesn't shut the Vector down, but doesn't say yes either. So he sort of tries to remain neutral in the whole situation. So that happens, and then we go back to the chapel. The guys spend the rest of, not to the chapel, to the stronghold, back to the stronghold where the heroes are following their fight with the wolves. They decide to skin the pelts and take them over to the town, and they decide also to boil the meat, or I can't remember if it was boiling it or preserving it in some way. So, next morning they make the trip, and they just essentially travel down to Loch Varn. As they're making their way down south through the valley, they note that the plantations, the areas where the crops should be coming in, the harvest is really poor. Part of it seems blighted. The plants that look edible are stunted and not, fully grown. Everything is it's a very poor harvest, and there's real fear that they might starve. As they approach, Arthmael the Demorthen asks if there is any way he can sort of feel. He asked basically to use the inside skill as some sort of mystical sense, right? And since this campaign is so low powered that he virtually has no spells, just to speak with dead, it seems to me it's a fun option, right? Maybe he's in touch with nature, and it's a mystical sense of sorts. So I say, yeah, so he's sort of trying to figure out what's wrong with the crops, intuit some of that, and I think I made it we discuss it, and it's like if it's very strong source of evil magic, it should be obvious, right? If it's a strong source of good magic or something, it should be obvious. It's the subtle attempts which should be hard to detect. So, that makes sense to me. So I think I go for like a skill difficulty of 10, which is moderate. And he rolls an amazing 23 or 25 or something like that. So I ruled that he actually feels the influence of ley lines, because we had discussed on previous sessions that the magic that permeates the world sort of runs through ley lines, and we had established that these stone circles and standing stones usually coincide with nexi, cross points where the ley lines would cross, right? So he immediately senses, that there is a ley line that goes roughly in this direction, right? So that it passes through the stone circle that he knows is there. What he does get, in addition to the ley line, which seems off, seems wrong, seems not to be working as usual, maybe weaker, he also senses that whatever evil is affecting the area and the crops is coming from beyond the lake. It could be south of the lake. It could be to the southeast of the lake. So, this region anywhere down here, that might be where the evil is coming from, but it's not coming from the village of Loch Varn itself. So, we figure that's enough information to start. They meet... they meet some farmers working on the fields. A man named Braedon comes over, and some of the other farmers rush up to the loch to give him a welcome. This man Braedon is ecstatic over the joy of finally having the Demorthin here. When he approaches, he recognizes Lochlang the Blackbird, the bard, and he recognizes, that the Demorthin, because he's dressed with the bone armor regalia of his office. So, he immediately starts talking about the problems with the poor harvest and the fear that they will die of starvation. They offer him food from the wolf meat that they had, but he declines. He says, no, let's take it to the Ansalir, the village mayor, right? The Ansalir will distribute the meat. So, they get the sense that these guys are so scared of the upcoming winter that they'd rather see the food distributed. So they get to talking, and what's been as they ride into the town, right? But it takes them a while because they're just at a walking pace. So they ask, any other things that have been going on, any news in the region, and then Braedon tells them that there have been sightings of strange lights and strange noises at night, coming from the ruins of Castle Magraith, south of the lake, and also rumors of strange lights and strange noises like wailing sounds coming from the forest, which is basically south of the ruins of Castle Magraith. The Blackbird Lochlan says, being a bard, says, well, that sounds like will-o'-the-wisps and maybe banshees in the forest. So, but nothing is concrete. The hunters have brought news of that, and sometimes the lights are visible when you're on the lake at night or early before dawn, right before true dawn. You can see some strange sights in the castle ruins. Let's see what else. Arthmael also asks for tales, trying to get Lachlan more material for his tales, right? He asks about any legends of local heroes or stuff like that, and then they get told that the legend of the main local hero was a man named Fergus Macraith, the last leader of Clan Macraith, who wielded a legendary spear called the Slea Croí, or the spear, the Heartseeker spear. They are told that this is a storied weapon, right? A weapon out of legend, a spear that is perhaps forged from Tugarch, which is the mystical silvery material rumored to even be an instrument to combat the Feondas, which are the evil spirits that sometimes roam the land. So this hero, Fergus, used to live in Castle Macraith about 60 or 50 or 60 years ago when the invading Alarans came. The men dressed in steel armor came and laid siege to the castle. Being unable to meet them in the open fields of battle, Macraith left the castle and took his people south to the forest, and then they conducted raids upon the Alaran knights who took up residence in Castle Macraith. And then one night, Fergus, with the Heartseeker spear, went into the castle with a band of warriors, and by unknown means of entry, right, he managed to enter the castle, and a great battle ensued. But at some point during this battle, the castle caught flames, and portions of the castle crumbled, and nothing else was ever known about the Macraith who went into the castle, right? The spear, if it still survived the inferno, should be in the ruins. Saint Nylene, saint of the Church of the Temple of the One God, was around in that time period, and she declared the ruins off limits because of the danger, and just blessed the whole thing as a tomb for her fallen people. And just it's never been, nobody's ever gone to the ruins since then in the last 50 or 60 years. So the guys wondered at the presence of that Saint Nylene was so close. They thought it was a remote figure from history, but no, it turns out that as near as maybe 50 or 60 years she was around here. By this time, they've gone into the village of Lochvarn, and they're talking to the Ansalir, the clan chief, and he confirms everything that Bredan told them. There's a feast in their honor. Vector Yaber is also in town because he has come to bless the crops for the small community of believers in the One Temple who actually live in Lochvarn. There are some people who have converted. At some point, Vector Yaber explains that yes, that Saint Nylene was alive, back then, and as a matter of fact, Baldwin, the keeper of the chapel, actually knew her personally. So they get that sense that this is not as remote a history as they thought. There is a point where the Vector Yaver makes this request to bless the crops, because the Ansalir has been leaning heavily on the Demorthin to bless the crops himself. It becomes quickly very clear that the entire hopes of the village that they not starve this winter are riding on the shoulders of the Demorthin's prayers and blessings of the crops to help the crops recover before the end of the harvest season, right? Which is still a short ways away. It's probably too late, but they're hanging their hopes on this blessing, restoring some prosperity to the region so that they don't die come winter. So at this point, the Vector tries to secure permission for himself to do the blessing, seeing if there's going to be some conflict. The Demorthen is actually not actively discouraging this. So, which was a surprise to me as a GM because I thought he would resist. So, since everybody seemed to acquiesce, we saw no further, no further reason to continue the train of thought. It was decided that fine, both would bless the crops, right? It shouldn't interfere. So, the Demorthen is clearly interested in the ruins and the forest. But again, he does have the information that the ley line goes through the stone circle. He knows that the evil is not originating here in the village of Loch Varn itself. It's somewhere beyond the lake. So, these are 3 probable places where you'd find things going wrong. And so they decide that, the combination of this legend of the last of the McCraiths who died in the ruins of the castle with a possible Tugark weapon is worth investigating first. So, they procure help from local guides, the Ancelier, and the entire village is at their disposal. Again, all their hopes are riding on the Demorthen, so they cooperate with anything they ask. They get a fisherwoman, the woman who leads the small fishing fleet. Picture small boats going into the lake to fish. And she takes them across in her own boat, but does not deliver them directly to the ruins, but to a spot on the shore a little bit ways off, right? People are afraid of the ruins. She confirms the sighting of the ghost lights or whatever they are within the ruins in the dark hours of the early morning when she's out fishing or conveying the hunters to the woods where they do the hunting for the game, that she has seen the lights herself. And, they realize that game is also scarce, right? So the hunting has not been as successful as it should have been. So the whole valley seems to be under a curse. And this explains the desperate wolves up in the mountains. If the deer and the forest game animals are scarce, then the wolves as predators have nothing to eat. So this explains why they've gone up into the mountains in desperation, or at least so they think, or at least it's a possible explanation. So, having gotten this information, they make landfall and plan to proceed directly to the ruins. And about that time is when we decided to call it. I think we covered all the main points here in this short recap. So, yeah, let's try and keep it short. We'll hopefully play next Monday and see how that develops. I definitely did some prep, and it paid off in terms of the legends and the information. It has piqued their curiosity. So, it seems to be going well. I'm looking forward to the next session, where the ruins of Castle McCraith will be explored, and perhaps they'll find something in there. So that's it, guys. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.